All right, why don't we get started? So again, welcome. My name is Ann Connors. I'm part of the admissions team here at Sloan. I'm joined by my colleague Karen, also on the admissions team. I've met many of you virtually, and for those who I haven't met, welcome and thank you for joining us for our faculty series. Karen and I are thrilled to welcome Court Chilton as our presenter, our faculty presenter for today to kick off the new year. As always, we hope you and your loved ones are doing well, staying healthy, and we appreciate you joining us today. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Court.
Hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me. Thanks for joining. This is a fun thing for me to do. I'm glad you could to make it. I'm in a studio at the Sloan building right now at MIT, and I'm here because this little pop-up studio I'm in is a good place to teach in. I can walk around a little bit. I'm not locked into my chair, and I can teach without a mask on. So I hope this is working for you. And one of the other advantages of being in this studio is that I can do something like this, where I can show my slides and talk to you and rove around. Just to quickly talk a little bit about what we're going to do today, the name of this session is Leading in Ambiguity, which is also the name of the course that I teach here at Sloan. And I'm just going to move so I can see your questions, and you can see my slides. And the picture that's up here and also that phrase, sculpting the fog, are sort of a visual and a couple of words to describe the kinds of problems that we're particularly interested in teaching to and helping students with when they come to Sloan. So leaders generally are working on open-ended types of problems. And not all problems in business are like this, but many are. Imagine you're trying to go down the road, but you're not sure out there if you're even on the right road, if there's going to be road out there or where the guardrails. And other people that might work with you can also see that it's foggy out there. And your job as a leader is to try to get people to come down this road with you and to push away the fog, clarify where the road goes, maybe even build new road. That's the nature of the kinds of problems that we're interested in. And so that's why I often start with this image. So it's not leading with ambiguity, it's leading into ambiguity. And that's the nature of the work we think that most leaders have to do. And this is our way of describing those kinds of challenges. Just quickly about me, and then we're going to move into what we teach around leadership and how we teach it. Prior to coming to MIT 10 years ago, I was a consultant, and I was working on large-scale organizational change projects all around the world. Things like merger integrations, SAP implementations, anything that had a large impact on the people within an organization. I tended to show up and do a combination of process improvement, coaching, learning, classroom and workshop settings, all kinds of things like that to try to bring an organization to a new place and do what's generally called today transformation type work. So that's my background prior to coming to MIT. Just quickly about where I sit at Sloan. You can see the MIT mission here at the top of the slide. And our motto is mens et manus, mind and hand. And so our job in what we do is to try to support the MIT mission and mirror its general approach to teaching, which is it's not enough to teach people what to do and to help them think better about, in this case, leadership, but also to apply it, to use their hands, to get in, get dirty with problems, and figure things out. It's not enough to have knowledge, you've got to be able to apply it at the same time. If you think about another university in our neighborhood, right up the river from us, Harvard, their motto is Veritas, truth. And MIT looks at that and goes, oh, that sounds a little too academic for us, a little too ivory tower. That's that little divinity school up the river. And if Harvard thinks about us at all, they kind of laugh at us a little bit too, and they say, oh, that's that little trade school down the river, all those engineers doing mind and hand. But it's true about our approach to leadership is a little bit more hands-on and applied. And so that's why I showed the motto of MIT. So that's the MIT mission, to advance knowledge and educate in management in this case. And then Sloan's mission is to develop principled, innovative leaders who improve the world. And then I'm part of the Leadership Center here at MIT and Sloan, and our mission is to build the self-knowledge and collaborative capability necessary for principled, innovative leaders to improve the world. So that's how the work that I do fits into the Sloan and the MIT missions. Okay? I'm going to pause here for questions periodically, but I just want to sort of orient you a little bit, and then there'll be a couple places where we'll look at the questions and we'll try to pause and make this useful to you as we go. I've seen some of your questions about leadership ahead of time, and I'm ready for some of those. Some of those can't be answered in an hour. Some of those can't be answered at all, like some of you wanted me to make a market call or about the labor markets or the financial markets. Can't do that either. But I'll try to answer as many of them as I can in the time that we have. So just quickly, the MIT Leadership Center that I'm a part of, what's new about now and that we're studying today is different than even 15, 20 years ago in terms of technological connectivity, the fact that we now have machines that can think. Organizations are flatter and more atomatized and digitalized. The pace of change and disruption has gone way up, and despite the efforts of some people to put America first, the fact is our economy is integrated with other economies, and that means a lot of complexity. So that puts new demands on leadership that didn't really exist even 15 and 20 years ago, when what was happening in the world at that point was the quality movement, lean, and lots of threads like that in the corporate world. So what's evolved since then is we just need leaders today that are more operating in a more collective way. Not a few smart people at the top, but people who are bringing other people around problems and aware of not only what their company needs, but what the larger community around that company needs. People who co-create solutions with others, and people who provide some coherence in the midst of a lot of disruption. So these are the kinds of trends and issues and types of leadership that we're trying to address in our work at the Leadership Center. And the fact is, COVID has just accelerated all of this and brought it much more to the fore than it ever has been in the past. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the kinds of problems that we're solving for. That's one of the basic tenets of agile and design thinking, is what problem are we solving for? And the same thing applies to leadership development. So these are the couple of ways of describing that. One is how to maintain your own confidence and your own courage on a foggy road when the way forward just isn't that clear even to you. And even if you do have a pretty good idea of what to do and where to go, you have a North Star, sometimes you've got to bring other people along and they can see it's foggy. And how do you get them to join you on that road and to stay confident with you when they can see, despite all your best efforts collectively to sculpt the fog, it's still foggy out there? How do you keep going? And the fact is, there are also, for many decisions that leaders have to make, there's a long lag between making the decision today and actually seeing the impact. So that's something that, how do we maintain confidence while we're waiting to see, does the signal we send out, do the actions we take lead to the kinds of outcomes that we want? So we're solving for these kinds of problems, and also these other kinds of problems that are really more about psychological, within the person type of problems. So the fact is that for a lot of problems in startups and big companies, in government, people in leadership roles are often part of the problem. They designed the system that isn't performing well right now. They've been rewarded in that system, and so they're locked in a certain way. They have status quo bias, and so we need to deal with that. The other thing is that we're also having to deal with the fact that fear, ego, my ability to show that I'm competent, that often can get in the way. And so we need to be self-transforming over time. We need to have a growth mindset, a sense that we need to keep evolving in time. And if our ego gets in the way, that's usually not a good thing as the world changes. And the other thing we're solving for is that most people want certainty. They want a clear path ahead. And sometimes there is that. Other times there isn't. But we still all crave some kind of certainty. And that's something that we need to learn how to straddle and be clear about. When can we say this is certain, and when can we say and admit, without diminishing confidence too much, there's stuff that we don't know or that we're still trying to figure out. So the way we deal with this is by giving students more repetitions, more reps, more chances to be put in situations where these are the issues, where these are the problems to be solved. And if all you have to rely on is your own personal experience, you're going to be a slow learner as a leader. So the way we try to deal with this is to put people in situations, simulate it, discuss it, talk to other leaders, and learn vicariously, not only from their own experiences, but those of other people, classmates, executives, faculty, lots of different kinds of exercises. That's meant to help people address these kinds of problems. Confidence, bringing other people to a problem, dealing with our own hesitation, dealing with our own ego, and the fact that everybody craves certainty. And so lots of repetitions on that are what we're trying to get done. Now, this is a good place to pause here, because now you hear sort of like our mission, the kinds of things that we're interested in solving for. And let me see if there are any questions that have come up so far that it might be helpful to address right now, Anne. Any things that you can think of?
Yep, to go off of what you're just talking about and the fog and how leadership will change, do you see, or could you tell us how you view leadership changing into this fog post-COVID world? We have a lot of questions on COVID, understandably, and change and leadership.
Yeah, the interesting thing for me, and I'll talk about this a little bit more as we get into one of the frameworks that we use a lot, is that no one really knows what it's going to be like post-COVID. And so what we do know is that what's going to be needed at that point are two enabling skills from leaders. They're going to have to do a lot more sense-making, and a lot more time is going to be needed to be spent on trying to figure out what's the world now, where are my customers now, where are my employees now. And so a lot of taking stock about where are we, where is the market, where are new opportunities. So much more emphasis is going to be needed to be put on sense-making, and then the other is going to be on what we call relating. Connecting with people, connecting with customers, connecting with employees and other stakeholders. And that taking stock, that sitting in the problem, as opposed to rushing to the first solution that pops up in front of us, that's going to be super critical. So these sort of enabling things to take stock, figure out where we are, there's going to need to be a period of that. And you can start to do it today, but it's going to need to really keep happening, and more emphasis put on it once we've got more people immunized. Another one, Anne?
Yeah, another one is, again, COVID, political unrest has really tested every leader. Do you see business leaders have shown maturity to lead organizations and teams through these difficult, challenging times?
Was the question, do I see business leaders doing this? Did I hear you right, Anne?
We're showing maturity in your research and experience with working with different leaders and firms.
I think there's a lot. I see some, and then some I don't think are getting it. I just see huge variation. I think that's the honest answer that I would give about. There is some maturity out there. There are people who are trying to lead in a collective way. You think, for example, just yesterday, certain corporations decided not to support certain congressmen that they thought were undermining democracy and taking away funding from them. Their PACs weren't supporting them anymore. So, and these are from corporations that you wouldn't expect to be doing that, Dow Chemical being one of them. But I don't want to make this too much about politics, but it's sort of easy because it's sort of top of mind for everyone. Not every corporation is doing that. Not every corporation has enlightened leadership, but by and large, most big corporate executives that I meet in the course of doing the work here at Sloan, and I do a lot of work with exec ed, most of them are pretty enlightened and trying to understand what's at stake here and are trying to lead in a different way than maybe they have in the past. They're trying to go toward the problem, be available to people. And so I'm thinking of that as a more mature way of leading, and they're having to adapt from their standard practices. I'm going to keep going, Anne, if that's okay. And we'll pause again in a few minutes, and then we'll leave time at the end also for some questions. What I want to talk about now is, once you've seen the problems that we're solving for, I'll talk a little bit about the particular course that I teach with MBA students. And the people in my classes are a lot like those of you that have joined us online. It's not just people that are part of the 2-year MBA program, that we also have people who are part of MFin, who are part of LGO, that are part of Integrated Design Management, IDM. And I have about a third of the class is Sloan Fellows that are in the room. And so this class has an unusual mix of part classic classroom things where we talk about research and leadership frameworks. I'll show you one in a second. And then part of the class is learning from the experience of executives who are living through or have recently lived through a particularly foggy road kind of experience. So I'll just talk about that quickly and show you one of the frameworks that we base the class on and drive a lot of discussion around. So normally what I would be doing is pausing here and asking you if you recognized anyone. And if you think you recognize someone in this picture, totally cool to put it into the Q&A. Most people, in my experience, can, if they are maybe from Europe, recognize the woman in white in the middle of the central picture. That's Mrs. Macron. And then some people remember the infamous white hat that Melania Trump wore at some rally. And my point in showing you these pictures is that most people cannot name anybody else in these pictures. And those are the people that you don't recognize, those are the people that we have come to the class and talk to students and about the problems that they're engaging with right now and how they're trying to grapple with them. So the person just here, this is Mark Edwards. He runs an NGO called Upstream, and they're trying to deal with income inequality in America by reducing the number of unwanted pregnancies. And they're in about 10 states in the US right now, and they're one of the most effective ways of dealing with income inequality and opportunity inequality that we know of. Because if you have an unwanted child, that means it's usually a bad outcome for you in terms of your life quality. And also the child has bad life outcomes. So Mark has an interesting way of doing an innovation in the healthcare sector to prevent unwanted pregnancy. The woman in blue in the middle there, she is the head of French paintings for the National Gallery of Art. And her challenge is trying to get more people beyond the 55-year-old white women who come to see French paintings. She's trying to enlarge the audience for what she offers at the National Gallery of Art in DC. And so how can she do that? It's not clear how to make that happen. And the culture of the National Gallery of Art is, let's call it a little staid, a little stale. So a lot of fresh thinking is not going to come from the top. She needs to get it from somewhere else. The person way over there on the motorcycle, that is someone named Matthias Altendorf. He's the CEO of Endress & Hauser, which is a Swiss engineering company. And his challenge was to help his company plan for and recover from COVID. And he's come and talked about what he did to do that. And the company managed it successfully. It's a family-owned company, but quite big, a couple $2 billion at least. And the point about this that I want to make is we get a wide variety of people to come and talk with the class about real problems, not case studies, but things that they're working on right now. So mind and hand. And we ask students what they would do in this situation before they come to class, and then they hear from the people who are actually handling it right now, what they did or are thinking about doing. So the point is also they're regular people. These are not people born with some incredible gift. These are people who are like us, but just engaging with the problem, trying to figure out where the road is, how to push away the fog and make progress. And regular people can do these jobs, but they're going to need to do them differently. All right, so that's the point of that slide. Here is the slide from past fall's class, and you can see that some of the classes I'm teaching by myself, and then other classes I have an executive in. And you probably don't recognize these names either, but what they are usually, they can be from the C-suite, but sometimes they're not. But they all have interesting, complex, multidimensional, foggy type problems, and they come from a wide variety of industries. Some of them come from government, some of them from startups, some of them from large companies, some of them are platform type of companies. They're all over the map. And they're all devoted to trying to help students and themselves. Part of the reason they show up is because they are still interested in figuring out how to be better leaders, even though they've been working for quite some time and have dealt with a number of difficult problems or really big opportunities. So that's how we do this course, and most of the time you can see the ones that have a red hash mark out here on the slide way at the end. That means that you had to submit how you would approach the problem that the speaker for that day has. And then we start with students saying, I don't know everything that Davide or Gallo knows, but if just given what you've told me so far, here's what I would do. And then we start with that, and then we have the person say, well, that's interesting. We thought about that, but we didn't do it because. And so that approach to learning, having people come in with a hypothesis about what they would do and then hearing more about it, we think lights up the neurons a little bit differently and helps people remember and help take away more lessons from each speaker. So a little bit more than half the classes had this immediate problem. You have to hand something in saying, this is what I would do. We talk about that first, and then we go to the speaker. The things that I'm teaching in between the speakers are based on a leadership model that is based on research conducted at MIT by Peter Senge, Deborah Ancona. I can give you the main articles and research if you'd like. But the basic idea, and the reason that MIT approaches this, we think in a distinctive way, it's not unique, but it's a little different than most places, is that we think most business schools are teaching a static, that means fixed leadership model. If you're a leader at this level of the organization, do these things. If you're a leader of a marketing function, lead like this. And we just don't agree with that. We think the world is too complex for that, and there's so much difference in contexts in which leaders operate. If you look at these contexts behind me, the English National Opera is not the same as a big biotech company like Charles River Labs. It's not the same as a flower company. So because the context is so heavily different, we think a more dynamic approach, one that's more mutable, that's process-oriented, is the right way to think about and to teach leaders. So the way we go about this is teaching people a process for leading where you're trying to define the problem, reveal challenges, identify what people and what skill sets need to be pulled together to address those challenges, and engage in conversations about what could our future look like, who could help, how can we get there. It's a more dynamic, more process-oriented way of teaching leadership. There's some things that we know for sure, but then we know that context is hugely important. So I'm just going to show you a couple more slides, and then we'll pause again for some questions, and then a couple more slides after that and more questions, all right? So given the fact that we believe in this dynamic way of thinking about it as opposed to a static way of thinking about it, here's one picture that again describes what we believe in a certain way. This is the town of Cremona in Italy. Maybe some of you have been there. This is the place where Stradivarius violins, Amati violins also were built here. It's a town of a lot of craftsmanship, built around 1100, 1200 AD, so it's an old city. But if you notice from this picture, it's just a stock photo, most of the buildings look alike. And that's not because of zoning laws, although I'm sure they have them there now. Most of the city was built up again in 1200. That's pre-engineering schools, pre-architectural schools. And so basically, if you're an architect or a builder at that time, 1200 AD, and you want to build a building, your only recourse at that point, there's no science yet around this, your only recourse is to look at what has been standing for a while and say, okay, let's copy that. Basically, your strategy, your default strategy has to be, let's follow best practice. And that works for a long time, and I'm sure these buildings have been reinforced since 1200 AD. But if you had magically time teleported an architect or a construction person from Cremona to today, let's say in San Francisco, where there's a lot of earthquakes and hills, that architect and construction person would not be very successful following best practice. And so that's the way we think about leaders, is you take one leader who's very effective in one situation, and if they're not able to adapt to another situation, they're going to be very ineffective generally. So the idea of best practice applies to certain kinds of problems, how to make a surgical incision, how to open up a new bank outlet of some kind, how to post to the web. Those are all things where best practice mentality works, but it does not work for leadership. So if you come to MIT, the whole point is to disengage from this idea of best practice when it comes to leadership and think about a more dynamic way of approaching it. So basically, when we think about leadership, we're thinking about finding leadership. The nature of the leadership that you provide needs to fit the context to a degree. All right, so first principle here is leadership starts with the problem. Frame and work the problem. It doesn't start with you and your career and your ambition and suggesting that to people that you're good and competent and people ought to listen to you. So it's about framing and working the problem first. And if you do that and engage other people in a useful way and both lead and follow, that's much more aligned with how we think about developing leaders and what leaders need to do. I've already talked about number two. Leadership is very context and system sensitive. So some of you have been asking about, well, how do I lead in this situation? And the answer is you're going to have to figure it out. So part of it is we're going to give you good questions to ask yourself and then try to help you figure it out. That's what anybody who is good at helping develop leaders is going to try to do. We don't have answers per se. We have ways of getting to an answer. Leadership is good management. For a while in the world, there were a lot of people who were talking about, well, there's leadership behaviors and there's management behaviors. And I'm a leader. I provide vision and I get other people to execute. We hate that. Okay, we just do. It's just awful. The leadership and management go together. It's about making things happen, providing vision, and also helping on the execution. And the idea of serving your people, creating a system that serves the people that are working in it, that's the management part of what leaders, who are people who are in leadership roles, I should say, that's what they need to do. We need leadership that's more distributed, and that's part of your job as a senior leader, is to figure out how can I push leadership down into more people in the organization? How can I help them be leaders? And then the fifth point here, leadership is really about focusing, enrolling, not selling people on a change, but enrolling them, getting to shape it, sculpt the fog with you. That's what it's really about, and it requires lots of energy. IQ, yes, you need smarts, but that's pretty much fixed. We need EQ, emotional quotient, the ability to connect emotionally with other people. That's super important. All the stuff about we need rational management. Well, we need rational and the ability to connect with people on the emotional stuff too. And then AQ, right here, the last, right in the middle there, that stands for adaptability quotient. We need people and leaders who have the ability to adapt to different situations, who can provide what's needed by a team, by a company, by a society at different points in time. And that ability to reflect and think about how do I need to show up today for these people, for this situation, that's what we try to help people do at the Leadership Center and in the course that We engage with these executives who come about how did they adapt themselves to this new problem, this new foggy problem that they were facing. So these are some of the principles behind what we do and how we do it. And we're not only talking to people about what to do, but about how to manage themselves. So we think that if you're really going to have an impact on people and help them improve the world, a lot depends on what's happening inside them, the sources and mental models from which their focus, their passion, the kinds of questions they ask, what they do. We need to help people focus within as well as on the what. If you want to know more about it, a great source is the MIT Sloan Leadership Center where I work. We have a great website. Go there, there's lots of free video. And you should look into Otto Scharmer, who's one of my colleagues who wrote a book called Theory U. So what is the framework here is that we use a lot is this one behind me, which is called the 4 capabilities plus model. And I'll just talk quickly about it. I've already referred to a couple of pieces of it so far today, but let me talk about the words that you see in black on the slide behind me. Sense-making, visioning, relating, inventing. Those are the 4 capabilities. Those are the things we need to see leaders doing. Sense-making is about figuring out where are we, what's the market, what's the culture of my organization. There are lots of different sense-making activities that leaders can do. Visioning, where are we going? How might we get there? What will it look like along the way? Those are all visioning types of activities. Relating is connecting with people, advocating for a certain route, but also listening to them. And inventing might be creating new tools, new processes, new organizational structures. That's what we would see leaders doing. You could imagine watching someone or hearing about someone doing more sense-making. You go and see more customers. Talk to these people that are not our customers. That's a sense-making activity. You can see people doing it. Those are what we see people doing. But there's more of these being types of things that we also focus on. And those are the words in red. And so we help people understand how to build credibility. And then this adaptability quotient, the AQ that I mentioned on the previous slide, has 5 components that we also offer courses for and that we talk a lot about in my course. And the 5 elements of that we think are particularly important to being an adaptable leader who can deal with a situation like COVID or the uncertain political environment or technological disruption in a business. Leaders in those settings need to be resilient, to be able to come back from setbacks relatively quickly, and they need to have a strategy for doing it. They need to have emotional intelligence to manage their own emotions and to be able to read emotions in other people. That helps with adaptability. They need to have a learning orientation as opposed to thinking they're the smartest people in the room or they've done this before. They need to follow the design thinking principles about living in the problem, having a growth mindset. That's part of adapting. And people who can be persuaded is an example of someone who has a learning orientation. Paradoxical thinking means being able to hold 2 competing ideas in your head at the same time and still make progress. An example of that would be we need to be super disciplined and have operational excellence, but we also need some innovation. How do we do both? We're never going to resolve a paradox. That's basically, we can navigate them. And so how do you make progress when there's 2 competing agendas? You need to have and both thinking. How to do that? It's hard and takes a lot of maturity to be able to do it. And that's part of what we're trying to help people with. And the last is confidence. I don't mean cockiness. I mean being willing to step onto the foggy road and try to make progress there. Having enough confidence in yourself and the people around you to say, I want to step into that. I want to try to take a leadership role in that because I think I can make a difference. Nothing is for sure, but having that confidence is part of what we know leaders need to have. And where does it come from? Usually it comes from prior experiences that you've had, exercises, lots of reps and practices. That's the base on which you develop your confidence. So again, that's why people come to Sloan, is to try to have more of those chances to build confidence, to step onto the foggy road and bring other people up there with you. So the way we think about this is that we know that the way you were brought up in your family, the kind of society that you grew up in, the culture, maybe the first boss you had, those all affect how you lead today. There's still your past leadership experiences and work experiences, working with other people, collaboration, that's all still alive inside you, and some of it's good, and we try to help you tap into it. Some of it isn't as useful, and we want you to leave it behind. And also, some of your future leadership skills are already there, present. You just haven't tapped them yet. So having access to both the past and figuring out what to leave behind and what to keep along with you, and then how to live and lead into the future, that's part of the kinds of exercises that we do. So the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pause for some more questions and then a couple more slides. The basic idea to have about leadership is that no one does all of this well. Everyone has weaknesses. Everyone has strengths. And we're working on this all our lives. So everyone is provisional. Incomplete is the language that we use. And we're trying to have people lead from their strengths, but also work on some of the things that they're not as good at. So we try to help people assess themselves in each of these domains, both the black, what do I do, and how do I do it? How can I do it more effectively with people? So, for example, how do I have a difficult conversation with someone? Something that we do here at Sloan. How do I do visioning? And how do I assess the quality of the vision? What does it mean to really invent in a startup situation? We're not only inventing and looking for product market fit, but we're trying to create a company that sustains itself. What does that look like? So those are the kinds of things that we're doing, and then we're also helping people learn how to manage themselves. That's the material that's here in the red. But if you come here saying, gosh, I got into Sloan, I'm good, I'm smart, I made it to Sloan, I'm at MIT, and therefore all I have to say in the future is, well, I went to MIT and what I know is X. You really shouldn't be here. Go somewhere else, okay? So the idea is you're always working on yourself and thinking about how can I show up today in this context for these people. That's what we want to help people get good at doing. Having a habit of doing that is really what we're all about. So let me pause there. I've given you this framework that we use, the 4 capabilities plus this material in red. And just see if there are any questions I can answer about this just to clarify it and talk maybe about how we teach it. And then I've got a couple more slides to show you and we'll and then have some more questions. But Anne, let me come back to you. Anything that you think we should talk about right now?
Yes. Can you maybe give an example of how students actually apply these takeaways throughout their time at MIT and into their careers?
Yeah, so while they're at MIT, because of the mens et manus, mind and hand sort of motto that we have, we want people to have as many chances to practice this as we can give them. So there are many opportunities to do projects within a single course. There are many chances to do projects away from Sloan. There are lots of labs and centers where students come and can, for example, create a startup and do some of this as well. And so there are maker spaces throughout MIT where people are trying to make things and see if, and some of them are digital, some of them are physical things. But those are all opportunities for people to try these things out and basically increase the repetitions, increase the reps. In my own class, what I want people to do is to think about themselves and their own situation, and I ask them to write a reflection paper in which they put themselves forward into the future and try to imagine themselves on a foggy road. What will they need to be doing differently at that point? And then we give people feedback and engage in a lot of dialogue and discussion about what that could look like, things to watch out for. Coaching is available to people at Sloan around this model that you're seeing here. And so a chance to talk about it with someone else is super important. It could be another student, it could be faculty. That's why we have lots of office hours and totally open to having people come see me. and I know my colleagues are the same way, but the basic idea, and I was hoping to get across, is that no one develops themselves as a leader by themselves. If you're not willing to sort of open up a little bit and talk about the things that are on your mind, things you're feeling, with someone else that you trust and who's trustworthy, again, you really shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. No one develops themselves and has this growth mindset just by reading a book and thinking about it for a while. You need to talk about it with someone else. And I'll say more about that in a second with my next slide.
Great. So we have a question about the speakers that you bring in and study. How do you determine who you are going to pick to study and speak?
Oh. I love this question because I work on it all year round. I'm always hiring, basically. First, I need a diverse set of speakers. I need to have men, women, people of color. I need to have people from startup world, from big corporate world, from military, the government. So diversity matters hugely to me and has been ever since I have started doing this course. So that's part of it. The other part of it is, there's two other things I would say. They need to come with complex, multidimensional, foggy problems that involve people. They don't come with technical problems. They need to come with things that might have a technical dimension, a strategy dimension, a marketing dimension, but that also have people in the middle of the mix too. So the kinds of problems, so diversity, kinds of problems, and then the third thing that's important to me is they need to be willing to engage with students. If I have any sense in my conversations prior to class with them, some of the people I know personally, others I don't, and I'll get recommended to me and I interview them a little bit. But if I have any sense that they're going to come and do something like, look, I'm smart, I'm good, I went to a famous institution, even MIT, and just copy me. Let me tell you how I did it, and just sort of copy me. If they're going to do that and not reflect on who they are and what they might have done wrong, then I don't want them. They need to be provisional, incomplete in the way they talk about the problem, in the way they think, and their openness to having a student say, well, gosh, why didn't you do this? And it's like, I don't know why I didn't do that. I just didn't think of it. So I need people who are humble is the net end. But again, I love that question because, man, I think about that a lot.
Great. So I think one more question that kind of relates to this. How are you doing during this crisis of COVID, and how have you modified the curriculum or the program to adapt the studies to this changing need?
Well, the course design itself, I mean, sort of, the fact that we have speakers, for example, and that I teach a bit on this framework, and some of the exercises that we do. I didn't show you this on the slide, but there's a tutorial session, small groups getting together to do some exercises to help bring some of these things up to the frontal lobes and to talk about it with other students. That's not on the slides I've shown you, but what's changed is a little bit, because we had to deliver online and we're a little bit limited in some of the, although I've done live, this past fall, I did some live tutorial sessions in a socially distanced classroom. What we've learned is that in the online world, a lot more can be done ahead of time, and in terms of helping people with administrative type things. So I've ported a lot of stuff where I'm sort of doing announcements to a little video that people see before they sign up for the class, so they know what they're getting into. I've ported more of the problems to prior to class so that people can ground themselves in what the speakers are going to talk about, so that on the day we just start from the get-go. Here's what I would do, and then speakers reacting, and it's a really rich conversation. So I think it's I haven't changed massively because of COVID, nor has Sloan in a sense. In terms of this kind of content, we're still doing some of the same types of exercises, and it's possible to do them in an online setting and put people through Zoom into contact with each other so they can talk about things with each other, and then we debrief. And so most of what's changed is a little bit about trying to find more ways to be in conversation with people in the class, less lecture, and we're not really that much lecture-based anyway, and fewer cases and thinking and much more dialoguing, much more discussion about hard issues. And so I try to do things to help everybody feel safe talking about emotionally difficult problems. Some of these cases that we talk about are about having to let people go, or about having to confront a CEO who's credibly accused of sexual harassment. Those are difficult challenges to talk about in a classroom, and we can still do that in an online world, and make some progress and have people feel like, I have a new strategy, a new way, a new script to draw on when I face a challenging problem in the future. Even if I never have to face that one, I have a way of managing myself and enrolling other people, dealing with stakeholders. Even though I may never have this problem in my own life, I have a new way of going at it. Hope I'm helping with that. Let me keep going, just a couple of other slides. Is that all right, Anne?
Yep, that's great. Wonderful.
Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these psychological things that change a little bit more slowly over time. That's the things that are here in red. You can manage resilience. There are ways of building emotional intelligence. They just take a little bit longer. And again, some exercises and some drip, drip, drip over time are the way to get at that. And I just want to show you a little bit about that. And then again, we'll have some more questions if you'd like. So one of the ways that we talk about this, I'm a huge, I play a lot of sports and I'm involved with sports. Maybe you hate sports, just go with me for a second. But one of the ways we think about helping people develop resilience and the ability to have some confidence is to have them think about other examples from the world, some world that they know. It could be sports, it could be music, it could be something else in business. And then thinking about that a little bit and talking about this. And so sometimes I show the classroom this slide. And I talk about how good sports coaches who teach the mental side of the game use these images. And so most of you know who these people are. That's Nadal right here and Megan Rapinoe on the other side, both with similar facial expressions. One's in an individual sport, one's playing a team sport. But what we know is they both spend time on the mental side of the game. And one of the problems that we're solving for is the fact that when you're under pressure, you tend to show up less effectively as a leader. And so each of these two individuals and others have interesting ways of handling the pressure. They've thought about it ahead of time, and they're able to reach for a particular script, some mental file for how to stay calm, how to stay focused, how to stay positive under pressure. And so we get people to think about similar situations in their own lives from the past and then be able to pull forward what was good about how they handled pressure in that situation and think about how to use that more. Because under pressure, we tend to reach for the most often reached for files, which are usually not productive. So under pressure, someone isn't listening to us, we act out. We start talking louder or talking faster. And there's all sorts of default settings like that. So this is just an example about different exercises that we do to help people manage themselves. And it's a simple one to do and to explain. And people usually can jump right into it and have a lot of things to share. And because of the nature of the people that are at Sloan, there's people from so many different cultures and walks of life that is usually really a rich conversation that's quite helpful for people to hear about this. The other thing that we know about these two athletes is that they're both have been able to play the game for a long time, and part of the reason for that is they're able to tap, and their coaches are able to tap into deep purpose. Why are they playing this? Why are they doing their sport? And the coach is able to help them grow and manage their game. Nadal still takes lessons and is trying new things. Same with Megan Rapinoe. And they're tapping into deep purpose. And we're trying to do the same thing here at Sloan, which is tap into your deep purpose. Why are you here in the world? Why are you interested in certain business problems or certain businesses or organizations? And so if we can help you tap into that deep purpose, We know that's going to be what helps keep you resilient over the long haul, where there's going to be difficulties, where there's going to be challenges. And so that's another exercise that we do, is try to help you tap into, why are you here? What are you trying to solve for? So last slide, and then again, I'll open it up to some questions. These are the kinds of things that not only in my class, but in other classes that we try to help people with. So you mentioned that leadership is a process. It's not a static thing. We're trying to help you build some habits around thinking about leadership. What mental, emotional, physical habits do I need to have in order to be more effective in the future? I mentioned number 2 there. How can I leverage material from my past experiences, and what should I let go of? How can I navigate paradoxes that exist in my life and work? A classic one is, I'm in a 2-career marriage. We each have challenges at work, and we're trying to have a relationship and maybe a family. How do I navigate with all those pressures? So we always have a class about that in my course, with usually a 2-career couple comes and talks about that. How can I manage my resilience, especially when I'm under pressure? The word we use sometimes is triggered. Things happen that light me up, that make me go off, and maybe in a less useful way than I would like. So how can I manage that? How can I anticipate that? Number 5 there is a big one, and I noticed it in some of your questions. How do I decide to go with the flow in my organization? And when am I going to push back against my own organization? And that, there's no best practice, there's no answer for that. It's just, you need to have a way of deciding, assessing, asking questions, engaging with people in order to figure out your own answer to number 5. And the answer that you have maybe today, where you work, might be different 6 months from now. So you probably need to do that thinking again and again and again. That's why the habit part of this is so important. And number 6, how do I need to adjust how I show up every day and still be myself, still be real? And so the basic idea is, how can I bring different parts of myself to the particular problem that we're working on now? So we're starting a business. I need to show up a certain way with the people that are working with me. Oh, now we're scaling. That might need a different part of me in order to be effective. All right, so overall, what we're trying to do is help people develop empathy. That's IQ is pretty stable for people, but EQ, that you can grow. That's a craft. And so we're trying to help people develop the craft of empathy and lifelong reflection habits, being able to think about what the situation is and what's needed, and then using some simple frameworks like the one I showed you a moment ago, the 4 capabilities one. Think about how to show up and make course corrections. That's the key to being a principled, innovative leader. So we tend to use a similar and related set of frameworks, skills for interaction, for thinking about purpose, for thinking about vision, for thinking about resilience. We have a nested suite of courses and experiences, and we're all talking to each other within the Leadership Center about how to have an overall experience while you're here at Sloan of development on a lot of different levels around leadership. And particularly, we're trying to do it so that when you think about yourself as a leader, it's not something separate from strategy, marketing, finance, operations, supply. It's integrated, woven together with those things. So if you are thinking, maybe I'll come to Sloan and I'll learn how to be a leader one day, and I'll think about that a lot, and then I'll put that aside for a second and then do operations, we're trying to integrate leadership development into almost every part of the curriculum at Sloan, because it needs to be woven together. As you're doing strategy, you need to lead. As you're doing operations, you need to lead. Well, what does it look like? What questions should you be asking yourself? That's where we're focused. All right, so I'm going to put this slide up and say thanks for being here, but I'm going to stay around for a little while. If we go over a little bit, I'm cool with that. Let's see if there are any more questions. If something occurs to you, I'm happy to get an email at cchilton@mit.edu. Here I am with Tim the beaver, who's a hardworking animal, and basically is emblematic of everything that we stand for when it comes to leadership. The only thing a beaver can't do is think about the system they work in. They're not conscious of that. They don't have that level of consciousness. But everything else about a beaver we kind of like and think is useful for thinking about leadership as well. And it's a nice contrast to that foggy picture I showed you before. All right. So 12:56, it's time for, I think, 2 or 3 questions, and let's see what we can do.
This is a loaded question, but we have a lot of people on here who are expressing some interest in how to manage being a younger employee or a new employee, and how to provide leadership without stepping on the toes of their managers or leaders. What advice on offering solutions or innovations when it might not be their role?
Yeah, so we talk about this a lot in our class, and it's really about focusing, as I said before, on what problem are we solving for, and making sure you're clear about that with the manager and the other people who may not be your managers but maybe peers. What problem are we working on? Have we framed it properly? Are we thinking upstream enough? What skills do we need to solve this problem? And are they in the room? So those are the kinds of questions that we would encourage people to think about. And then there are ways we teach people how to have honest conversations, empathetic conversations with managers about what may be missing, and to do that in a way that doesn't step on people's toes. But there's always going to be managers out there that are not enlightened, who might not want to have those conversations with you, and who, quote unquote, don't approach the problem in the same way that you do, or that you would be trained to do here at Sloan. And so we talk about what to do in those cases too. That, having difficult conversations, even with your boss, there are ways to do that. And we help people think about the timing, when you should do that, why you might want to wait, or why you might want to just leave, or there are a whole variety of answers. No best practice, again. Unfortunately, part of what I have to say to you is it's about the question, so I don't really have answers for some of these things. There's no best practice. You need to work this through for yourself, and that's what we're hoping to do, is give you some skills for thinking it through for yourself.
Excellent. So I'm putting you on the spot. Who is the most admirable leader that you have seen leading in ambiguity, corporate, politics, startups, or other? Hard to answer that because I have a lot of people that I follow and that you may not have heard of, but one of the best speakers in my class this past fall is someone I just have admire greatly. He's the CEO of a company, you can look them up on the web, they're called Elite Flowers. They're one of the largest fresh flower businesses in the world, several $billion, 18,000 employees, huge, no one's heard of them. You've bought their flowers, I guarantee you. Early March, they started to see their orders evaporating. And they're selling cut flowers grown on their own farms in Ecuador, Peru, Kenya, and Ethiopia. They're starting to, and then they sell them to Whole Foods here in the US or to other retail chains in Europe and Asia. They're all over the world. And they're starting to see their orders evaporating as COVID started spreading. And then March 12th, 13th, and 14th, they got calls from all major retailers, Carrefour, Whole Foods. And they basically said, look, unless you have some way of getting us PPE, we're not buying anything from you. We're not buying flowers now. We're focused on dealing with COVID. And so overnight, this billion-dollar company had half of their orders for most of the channels that they work in evaporate, go to nothing. There's no real framework for how to handle orders going to nothing for half of your business. And so the Galo Sanchez, who was the COO, who was the first speaker in my class, just wowed everybody by saying, look, I had to admit on day one, we have no idea how to handle this. There's no framework for this. We're just going to have to deal with the problems as they come up. And in the last 9 months, they've recovered all of their lost orders. They've entered new businesses. They've kept all of their employees. And it's just not miraculous. They just worked the problem in a really interesting way. He created 2 war rooms. One focused on closing the, several $100 million revenue gap and how they could do that, and met daily. And he bounced between that room, the financial room, and the legal and health room, war room that they set up. And he bounced one room to the other all day long for months as his team tried to wrestle with what are the health requirements in this country, how do we help our people follow them, how do we help keep our people safe, how do we close this gap? And then he met with farmers, he met with distributors,
He met with customers, and he and his team just spread out and just kept working the problem. And in 9 months, they've been able to recover all of those orders and even grow a little bit. And they've got some huge new opportunities through online distribution of flowers. They are distributing, they have a cold chain because of their ability to move flowers around the world. And now their cold chain is used by lots of other companies who need that cold chain to get their products to market all around the world. Milk being an example, believe it or not. So for me, he's just one example of someone who just did all the kinds of things we're talking about and didn't think he had all the answers. Hugely humble guy, just trying to work the problem. Beautiful.
Great. So one more follow-up question. Does student engagement with speakers ever extend beyond the classroom?
All the time. So I just helped someone yesterday who, one of my speakers again from this fall, is a guy named Bob Sherman, who was the former ambassador to Portugal under Obama. And we have some people that are interested in government service at Sloan. And they said, I've been thinking a lot about what Bob talked about on that day. And I'd like to get in touch with him to think about these issues that are going to come up under the new administration. And so I connect people all the time with our speakers. And usually if we're live in the classroom with speakers, we often have a lunch or a dinner after the class, more chances to engage with the speaker. So for me, that's just part of what we need to do. And that's why, again, one of the criteria I have for the speakers in my class is they have to be willing to engage with students not only on the day, but afterwards.
Great. So I'm going to put you on the spot again. Throughout your research and work, what has been the most impactful thing you've learned about yourself as a leader and the way you handle ambiguous problems?
Well, I would say two things. One is that I thought about myself for a long time as really good at sense making, analyzing situations, and I've had to realize that there were more ways to do sense making and that I needed to attend to that even more often and with more energy than I have in the past. So, when we talk about the 4 capabilities at Sloan, we often talk about how most leadership models that you see emphasize heavily. You read a lot almost every day in the literature about visioning and relating kinds of things when it comes to leadership. And we think one of the most underdone skills is the sense-making skills, the ability to study a situation, talk to people about it, and then frame the problem. That's the most appreciated skill of a really good leader and manager. And I've come to share that about just thinking about the kinds of things I've had to deal with. I've had to learn a lot there. The other thing, just from the red part of what I was sharing before, the adaptability quotient, my ability to manage my own emotions. I'm super impatient. I can show you a picture if we go to another set of slides of a visual that I keep up above my desk of sort of St. George killing the dragon. I see dragons everywhere, and it's like, let's deal with this. And I just need to slow down and be a little bit more patient with people, and that's something I'm still working on because just it's who I am. It's just like I'm the oldest of 6 children. Things are generally out of control growing up, and so you have to sort of quell this thing, and you can't tolerate too much disorderliness, mess, if you're going to make any progress. So I tend to be impatient, and I have some strategies for working on that.
The final question we have is, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but do you have any recommended reading that people can do to kind of build up on what you've talked about?
Yeah, so there's a couple of articles. Sort of the great one that I refer everybody to, it's just a 2-pager. It's called In Praise of the Incomplete Leader by one of my colleagues, Deborah Ancona. And it has the 4 capabilities described in it. So In Praise of the Incomplete Leader, Deborah Ancona. Another book that I'm reading right now is by a husband and wife team. I'm going to get their names wrong, but the name of the book, you can look this up on wherever you go online to buy books, is a book called Rapport, R-A-P-P-O-R-T. And it's about how to have difficult conversations with people And there's a couple of nice frameworks in there that I think are really useful for how to help people who may be off the reservation a little bit unaligned with your own view. Some of you asked about that in the questions you sent ahead of time. There's some great techniques in that book and a framework that you can use in a wide variety of situations to connect with people, make sure you're having an honest conversation with them, and maybe earn the right to have a conversation about where to go next, so that they feel some agency in this. They're not having something done to them, they're doing something with you. So Rapport is another really interesting book. I have a list that I can send to you, Anne, if you want to make this available, of about 12 books that sort of form the background, the basis for my course. Some of them are about psychological things, some of them are about organizational change and culture, and some of them are about just pure leadership. But Rapport is super interesting, just very new, came out last year. And then In Praise of the Incomplete Leader is from, I think, the 2011 or 12 region.
Yes, definitely. Send it my way and we will pass it along to everybody who attended today.
Okay.
I think we're out of time, unfortunately. I know normally if we were on campus at Sloan, you would have a line out the door of people asking you questions or stopping in for office hours. But any final last words before we say thank you and goodbye?
I hope this has been helpful to you. Maybe it just sculpted a little bit of fog about how you think about leadership and how understanding a little bit about how we approach it. This is a super exciting and interesting place to be as a student and as a faculty member. Really vibrant, open place. So hopefully you got a sense of that, at least, even in an online way today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Court, for this amazing session. Thank you all. And as I said at the beginning, we hope you are all doing well and staying healthy. And we really hope to see you on campus sooner rather than later. So take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone.